Before we begin, I want to let our listeners know that today's conversation includes a brief mention of addiction, alcoholism, and suicide. If these topics are difficult for you, please take care while listening and feel free to skip this episode if needed. Your well-being is important to us. Hello, and welcome to the Pro Series Conversations from CheckBox Pro. My name is Missy, and I'm the founder of CheckBox Pro, where we help school leaders become their most efficient and effective selves by matching them with ed-focused executive assistants. Each member of our team has over 10 years of experience in the education sphere, and though we may consider ourselves pros in some areas, we can't be an expert in every area. This is why we are excited to bring folks working in the education space to offer tools, tips, and insights to make the life of a school leader even more sustainable. Today, you get to hear from Athea Davis. Athea is the Director of Social Emotional Learning and After School Mindfulness Educator for Etoile Academy Charter School. She is the author of Today's Gonna Be Awesome Sauce, Daily Meditations for Youth, Parents, and Families. She's the host of the education podcast, Mind Declutter with Athea Davis, and she's the events coordinator for professional learning and development for the Coalition of Schools Educating Mindfully. And she's a regular writer and contributor to School Rubric and the Human Intelligence Movement. Needless to say, she is passionate about mindfulness, which is an area of growth for so many people, myself included. Today, I'm excited to learn from her about test anxiety and how mindfulness can help students and staff navigate these stressful times. And bonus, stick around to the end where Athea walks us through a mindfulness exercise. Hi, Athea.
Hey, Missy. I'm super thrilled to be here with you.
I'm
about all my favorite things.
Good, because it's all the things I don't know anything about. It is I'm like one of those people who's like wound up real tight. And so mindfulness is like one of those things that I really should weave into like my daily or at least like some sort of rhythm. But it's not something I've done yet. For our listeners, I'm just going to tell them, I got connected to you through Kaylee Columbero, who I was reflecting. I was like, oh my goodness, she's been one of my clients for like 6 years now. So she was my second ever. And I was texting her and told her I wanted to do an episode on managing test anxiety as, obviously we move into testing season. And she, no joke, like immediately screenshot your LinkedIn page and text it to me. She's like, well, I have the person for you. You just need to talk to Athea. Yeah. And I was like, oh, well, I mean, of course, like I've heard you and I've seen obviously your signature and I just didn't connect the dots. So she's clearly a big fan of what you've done for the students at Etoile.
Yes.
So it just felt like a no-brainer to extend the invite. So thanks for accepting.
Yes, of course. And thank you, Kaylee, for connecting us.
I know. She's so great. Okay, so before we fully jump in, I just would love for you to be able to, I read your LinkedIn bio, right? Like the very high level stuff, but I'd love for you to introduce yourself to our listeners, specifically highlighting, your background, career journey, any important, milestones or steps that got you to the role that you have today at Etoile and just the work that you're doing on all those different fronts that were mentioned previously.
Absolutely. I'm like, okay, so how far back do we go? We'll go back to, you mentioned I'm a tightly wound person. And I remember saying years ago when I thought about like mindfulness, yoga, these things that are very like slow and what is it or I think my question was, what's in it for me? What am I going to get from it? I've been a runner most of my life. So, quick, just movement and moving and grooving and going, like the stretching stuff, the slowing down, the breathing, it was not for me. And it was not. I thought I wanted to know, what am I going to get from it? And I went through a really big challenge in my life. I have a now 19-year-old who's a freshman in college. At the time, I was going through a divorce from his father. His father suffered alcoholism. And that in and of itself was very, very challenging to navigate. And a friend recommended that I just try this yoga class. And that's when I was very resistant to it. But I was running and I was doing all the things to manage the stress in my life. And it wasn't quite enough. And so when I went, I had the experience of, oh my goodness, I'd never connected to myself in that way before and slowing down. And so I had a lot of questions. I'm a naturally curious person. So I just went back for more and more to learn. And it had such a positive impact on my mental and emotional state And then the way that I was able to show up as a mom and be the person that I really wanted to be for my son, not just as a mother, right? Like as a mother, but also as a mother that was navigating this very stressful event. Like many of us, we navigate challenge and change and stress all the time. It doesn't have to look like divorce. It could look like multiple things. We're humans on this planet. And the fact is that we face challenge in many different aspects. And so I was learning that these tools were having such a positive impact on my life that I wanted to just dive full force into learning everything that I could, from yoga and mindfulness, how to work and teach this to kids, how to implement it in school. So I did this big career leap from law into education. I guess I would be remiss, Missy, not to also say that during the divorce and after the divorce, a couple of years after that, my prior spouse took his own life. So there was suicide that we experienced. When I say we, my son and I experienced. He was very young when it happened. He was 8 years old. And again, what I leaned on the most was these practices. I don't know. I feel like they really just saved my life and saved my son's life, and the way that I could show up with such emotional resilience through such a really hard thing. And then I couldn't just sit and keep all of this knowledge to myself. I had to share it with others because it was having this positive impact on my life in such a very challenging, couple of moments, from the divorce to the suicide. So I started teaching kids and families and working with any possibility I could find, and then started working with a nonprofit at the time called Sonima Foundation. They now have changed their name, Pure Edge. They're still around with many awesome resources. Well, Pure Edge came into the Houston Independent Area School District many years ago. It might have been 11, 12 years ago. They had a big grant to study the impact of, at the time, we weren't even saying mindfulness or social emotional learning. We called it health and wellness, to study the impact of health and wellness, tools like mindfulness-based social emotional learning, which I can get into. What is that? What does that even mean? So we went into 10 schools in HISD. I was assigned to one of those schools. Particularly the campus that I was assigned to was a campus that was part of North Forest ISD. There was a lot of change and a lot of challenge, and they had just come under the umbrella of the Houston Independent School District. So you can imagine going from, if anybody in the background of education, we know that it's hard in and of itself, but changing from one administration to another, new leaders on campus, new teachers on campus. And then here I come in and we're implementing this new thing. And in education, things are changing all the time. So they're looking at me like, oh, she'll be gone in a year. So the grant was for 3 years. I call it my blood, sweat, and tears story, because implementing mindfulness-based social emotional learning to kids and making it relatable and practical and fun was no small feat. But I was very determined because I knew how much it impacted my life in a positive way, the way I could show up as a mom, and the way that I could help my son navigate such intense emotions going through the grief and the trauma that he went through, and how it helped him along his journey and succeed ultimately, as we're looking at the whole child going through, something like that in terms of the impact mentally and emotionally. So that being said, by the 4th year, the grant was over. The school loved it so much. The principal said, I'm putting you in my budget and we're going to take you on full time. So that was just this seminal moment for me, that all the hard work that I was doing really made a difference. And I'll pause. I've been talking for a while, and I do want to say that there were many teachers at this campus. The elementary still exists, Shady Dell Elementary, which is now part of the Houston Independent School District, that connected to and helped me along my journey. I was green. I didn't know what I was doing. It was my first time in a school. They really taught me all the things that I needed to either learn or be coached on, or put me in the direction that I needed to learn to make these practices accessible within a school context. And so it was also the community that I was in that helped, grow me along the way to ultimately be where I am at now at Etoile as their Director of Social Emotional Learning. So that's a lot. I'll pause. If there are any questions, and there's probably a lot in between.
Well, first, I'm so sorry that for you and your son, but also like what a beautiful way to like, I mean, I would imagine the empathy that you're able to bring every single day is incomparable, right? Like I mean, not that we're like, okay, everything's for a reason, right? But a way in which to take that and go, okay, I've got to survive through this, right? Like for my sake, for my son's sake, like we have to figure out how we're going to continue to walk this earth in a healthy way. And what a great gift then that you've been able to like extend.
Huge thank you. You reminded me of something, Missy, is that in my book today is going to be Awesome Sauce. That book came from this experience too. And then and another way to share these practices with students and families and educators. I had this moment after the divorce and like really understanding alcoholism and addiction and studying and learning everything I could about it. And then again, learning mindfulness-based practices. I realized like I had like these three choices. I could do nothing, I could wallow in the pain, or I could take a stand for what it means to stand in love for something. And what does that look like? And I went with that latter. I'm going to stand in all of this pain and challenge and trauma in a place of love. How would one move forward from that? And it was really about making impact for others and trying to make connections with students. I mentored youth in the juvenile justice system for over 5 years, working with an organization called Houston Revision, teaching them mindfulness-based practices. And maybe they didn't have someone that, went through suicide in their life or experienced it, but they had challenges in their own way. So just finding, these ways to connect and plant seeds of mindfulness in kids' lives, in families' lives that could possibly open up and make a difference, like it did for me, like it did for my son. And I think that just still drives the work today, that I know what's possible. I've seen so many kids that have struggled in their own ways, that have been very resistant to the practices, that it's not for me. Again, like me, this is not for me. What am I going to get from it? This is crazy. I don't need to slow down. That have really transformed from not being able to manage their anger or their anxiety, who've turned out that they've wanted to start leading the practices and teaching others in their class. So to me, it's like that's the fuel that keeps me going.
Yeah. No, I think it's a practice. I think all of us will come face to face with it at some point. When in their life they come face to face with it, like just, personally, like our family right now, or my, just normal stress of like a job, right? And so my husband recently picked up, I'm going to be remiss in the title of I know the title of the book. I don't know the author's name and I feel terrible, but it's like Mindfulness for Mortals.
Okay.
And it's just like a daily meditation to some extent, right? But it's been really impactful. Just this idea of like thinking of ourselves as finite, right? And thinking of ourselves as actually like leaning into imperfectionism, right? Like when we, as a struggling perfectionist, right? Like that is like a lesson that I need to learn daily, because it's what actually allows me to like extend grace to myself, but then in turn extend it to others when they're having those hard and stressful moments, and to be able to just view people as human. And I think that's a great practice for us all. So I know then, after that, just your experience, and then I know the work that you are doing at Etoile is much bigger, right, than just like managing testing, or just like helping. But as we move into testing season, right, like I think about, like, I feel like it's so different at the end. I'm not even like, I mean, I'm very far removed from elementary and middle of high school, but also not in a way. And so there just wasn't a whole lot of stress associated with testing, and just like the testing pressure. I don't remember feeling that as like a school. And I feel like as I've gone into education, and even just in the last 15 years in education, I've seen it get more and more and more stressful, just like the expectations on teachers and the expectation on students, and just like this school culture around testing. Just, you can feel it in the spring, right? Like all of a sudden everybody's anxiety and stress skyrockets, like it regardless, like operations, because they have to navigate all of that, and just like schedules, obviously teachers, SEL, support staff who are like just feeling and seeing it around them. They're like, oh my goodness, how do we manage this? So how do we take and help students and really staff for that matter as they kind of go into these stressful moments. But before we jump into like strategies, or can you just tell us a little bit about high level like test anxiety? Like what's definitions, causes, signs and symptoms, and then that's kind of a 2-part question and you can weave it in as however you see fit, but it's like, is test anxiety different than general anxiety? And do we see any sort of relationship between those two things for students?
Yeah, so testing anxiety, I mean, and it's a chat, like, I don't want to take away the fact that like testing anxiety, it's a big deal. It's a huge challenge and something that mindfulness can help students and teachers address successfully. So testing anxiety is a type of performance anxiety. It could be a test, a speech, an event, a sports event. It's when it's a combination of physical and emotional symptoms that we might feel before, during, and after this big event, like a test coming up or some other thing that I've mentioned. Sometimes the physical symptoms show up as stomach aches, headaches, sweaty palms, and it's the pattern of these things. Sometimes mentally, emotionally, it could come up as not being able to sleep, brain fog, restlessness. There might be some procrastination. No doubt there might be some negative self-talk involved. Now, do we all do these things from time to time? Absolutely. But I think the things that we should be looking for if we're thinking about, well, am I seeing this in myself or my students? It's the pattern of these mental, emotional, physical symptoms over a period of time. So if you have that awareness about the students in your classroom, it's something to make note of and perhaps have a conversation with a student or their parents that you're noticing these patterns. So again, the testing anxiety is a type of performance anxiety. Some people have testing anxiety, but not, or like a type of performance anxiety, but not generalized anxiety. So generalized anxiety could be because of a number of reasons that you feel worried or nervous about something, generally speaking, in your life. And there could be, other deeper causes that are at the foundation of why you have that anxiety. So the performance anxiety is really triggered by this big event that's coming up, particularly since we're talking about the testing, the test for sure. Or you might be, having those dreams that you're about to take a test, you didn't finish the test. I don't know if you've ever had those dreams before, but I've had those dreams for sure. They are not fun. They are not fun dreams at all. So, a lot of common ones in kids, for instance, in terms of symptoms, is going to be the stomach ache. Now, I know all kids get stomach aches, but if you have kids that are, fairly okay, but they're coming up with these stomach patterns around certain activities, around certain, maybe it's a quiz around certain content material, and you notice that they're getting headache. They're always saying they have headaches or stomach aches anytime you cover that content, or that you're covering the material in class through an exit ticket, and they again have the same stomach ache or need to go to the restroom. These are things to take note of, to be aware of, to say, this might be going on. That there might be some performance anxiety that is happening.
That's so interesting. I did see that term when I was doing a little bit of preliminary, loosely calling it research, right? Let's not take away from real researchers out there, but doing my homework, and I saw performance anxiety and I was like, like I, for the most part, never got nervous or anxious about tests, but make me do a speech where I just stand up in front, like this prolong, like planned, right? Like if you just ask me to stand up in class and like explain my answer on something like in the moment, fine. But if it was like, hey, on Friday, Missy, you're going to give a speech on X content, or just you need to memorize this and you cannot look at your notes. And I'm like, I'm done. I'm like, take me. I can't do this. Like, this is like, when you said sweaty palms, I was like, are my palms getting sweaty now? Just like thinking about like flashing back to times when you asked me to speak in front of somebody.
I've talked to people, attorneys, people in the legal field, trial attorneys, where other attorneys like break out into sweat, like full body sweat, shirt soaking wet when they have to argue their case, right? That would be like a public speaking situation where performance anxiety is occurring, but not aware, like they're not aware that that's happening. Students, I've worked with students particularly that, maybe in their school context, this is more like one-on-one, they have to give a lot of presentations and they completely freeze up at even the thought, right, of having to give a presentation or a talk in front of the class. So yes, those would be the performance anxiety where you feel like you're going to be judged. I mean, you're being judged or evaluated in some way. And there's some deep worry that you're going to be rejected or fail in that process.
This might be a segue, but I'm thinking about common misconceptions around this, and I probably have been guilty of it in the past, right? Yeah. Is like test anxiety is either like one misconception, right? Test anxiety is not real. It's just a lack of being prepared, right? So it's fabricated, or it's going to go away on its own, or like exposure, right? Like the more you do something like that test anxiety, or, we can use the looser term performance anxiety, which I kind of want to do now because I fully empathize with that, right? Mm-hmm. Is like, well, the more you give speeches or the more you play sports or the more you get up on stage and do that, it will solve itself. Is there any validity to any of those? Are they all misconceptions, or is there validity to some of those beliefs that we might be telling ourselves or telling others about test anxiety?
I think so. Every individual is unique because you have performance anxiety and you are, maybe you're going to learn some routines or tools today. I'll do, a guided body scan at the end of our time together. And these practices are great, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not ever going to have performance anxiety. Sometimes we struggle with it, and it's a way that we learn how to manage it in a healthier way. Sometimes we outgrow it in the sense that, not meaning like we get older and we outgrow it, but sometimes we do certain things over a certain period of time and we don't have that performance anxiety anymore. But does it mean that I'm going to do this 10 times and I won't have performance anxiety? I don't think there is a formula to say that you're going to, do this practice 10 times, or you're going to do the speech 10 times, you're going to take the same test multiple times, and it's all going to go away. I think the important thing is to name the fact that you do have the anxiety. Oftentimes, we're not aware that we have the anxiety, like thinking back to the attorney standing in front of the jury, sweaty as can be, but not even aware to even name that it is a type of performance anxiety. Mm-hmm. Or a student that has a stomach ache or a headache, and maybe the teacher's not aware, the student's not aware. I just know this is hurting. And it's important to name it, because when we don't name it, it's almost like we make it worse. We amplify the anxiety itself. So when we can recognize the symptoms, it doesn't mean every stomach ache or every headache is going to be a type of performance anxiety, but contextualizing it, right? And understanding what are the patterns here. Am I having a stomach ache every time I review this content? Every time I know I'm going to have to take a test over this? Okay, that might be something to look into. There might be some performance anxiety there. Okay, you know what? Let's normalize that this occurs. This occurs for many people, many different times. Even actors that go and they've acted most of their life, or musicians, they still get performance anxiety. Yeah. I've talked to many people throughout the course of my career. There's still times where I feel anxious about, and it's a performance type anxiety. Am I going to say the right thing? Am I prepared enough? It's just a natural part of being vulnerable about your skills and your knowledge. And when you name it, also there's a thing, when you name it, you tame it, which is kind of a fun thing to say. But when you name it, you do tame it, because you're acknowledging. You can also think about it as like befriending your anxiety. So you're naming it, you're taming it by just naming it. And then there's some strategies you can use along the way. Certainly, does it help to be prepared? Absolutely. Your anxiety is not going to go away or get any better if you have a lack of preparedness. So preparedness is key. You want to be doing all of those things to prepare well for whatever it is, for the test, for the speech, for the writing prompt, for, whatever the performance is. You want to do all the things to help you get there. Now, you've heard the term, I'm going to psych myself out.
Yeah.
I'm going to psych myself out and I'm not going to do well. We get too much into our head. And again, I think, so that's one of the symptoms that show up when we say, I'm going to psych myself out, is when we are steeping ourselves in that negative self-talk. Oh my gosh, I'm so stupid. What am I thinking? I'm not going to do well on this. And you've got to become aware of that. When you become aware of that voice, and there are practices you can do to become aware of that, then you can flip the script and just, again, you name it. Oh, and some people like to name their negative self-talk, like give them name. You can get like your alter ego, right? Like give it a name and say, oh, not today. I'm not going to allow that voice in my head to take over. I hear you, but you're not going to take center stage. And so it's important that, and we'll go over some of those. So even just like a simple breathing practice that you spend time, you're just, inhaling through the nose, exhaling through the mouth. It might be kind of uncomfortable. Students are like, oh, this is so weird. I'm sitting here quietly. What's somebody, and you can start hearing that little voice. When you get really quiet, is anybody looking at me? Are they looking at like how I'm breathing? And so if you've never stopped to slow down to even hear that voice, you probably have never realized how much negative self-talk you have. So it's actually really an interesting exercise just to sit and say nothing and just to see if you can hear your breath, to see what's going to go on in your mind. The uncomfortable silence, some might say.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Okay. So, I mean, yeah, this is a perfect segue into like strategies. So I think honestly, strategy number one is, to your point, like just name it. Just say the thing out loud, right?
Yes.
I mean, I think so much of the problem, right, of so many issues is the secrecy, right? Like the making of things taboo, or the not saying. So it's like, if you just say the thing out loud, but and maybe not out loud, but at least be honest with yourself. Like that's a good first step. So, okay. So naming it, just name it to tame it.
Name it to tame it. Naming the fact that you have anxiety. around
this very thing. And that's, sorry, I'm just going to cut you off. Like, that's also a really beautiful thing, is like to not make it this big thing. It's like even to be able to narrow, it's like, I'm having anxiety about this test right in front of me, or this speech, or this thing, right? And not making it like I'm an anxious person, or I'm going to have anxiety forever, or I'm going to be, no, for this moment, in this moment right now, I'm feeling anxious.
Yes.
And just being able to say that. Okay. Sorry, this is great. Okay. So tell us some strategies that you can, to help helping students manage that anxiety, that performance anxiety whether it's in the moment or in advance.
Yeah. Once you've named it, and and you're not allowing that anxiety amplify, movement is really key to help calm the nervous system. And there is no one right movement. And sometimes your environment is going to depend on what kind of movement that you can do, right? So you might be in class and you might notice after, you have a teacher that is teaching you some of these things and helping you recognize that, okay, if I have a stomach ache or headaches, or I'm recognizing these physical symptoms, or I have this negative self-talk when it comes to this content or this test or quiz, maybe I have this testing anxiety, this performance anxiety, but I can't get up and run around the room because I'm in a classroom. What is something, that I can do? This is why mindfulness-based practices are really good. And you can just add just slight movement. One of my favorites is taking your hands and just gently compressing them on your heart. So I put my hands on top of each other, and then you just gently give yourself just a little compression on the heart space area. Now that in and of itself is a strategy, because a gentle compression on the body is calming to the nervous system. So your nervous system is in this like fight, flight, freeze mode. You're in your sympathetic nervous system. When you're in that like performance anxiety mode, your brain is like triggered, like, okay, this is not comfortable. This is what I need to do. I need to fight it off. I need to run it off. I'm not okay. The gentle compression is going to reverse that impact and say, okay, it's okay. We're going to calm the nervous system here. And you add a breath to it. And a mindfulness breath is just, a long, slow, deep breath in through the nose, no judgment, just being in the moment, breathing in, and then you exhale, breathing out slowly through the nose or mouth. You take a few of those, and maybe that's all you can do in the moment. And this is a great practice. I call it hands-on heart breathing. So gentle compression, you take a few breaths in through the nose, out through the nose or mouth. And then it's likely you're still going to have the performance anxiety. I'm not saying, take a few breaths, it's going to be all gone, you're going to be great. But you've named it, you're using that tool, and then maybe you're out of class. And when you're out of class, maybe after school or at home, you can find your favorite exercise, whether it's running or walking or playing a sport. It's just good to get movement in any way that you can. So movement is key. Sometimes we don't want to move. We want to just kind of like ball up and, refuse that this is actually happening. So the more that you can move, the better. And then when we can combine that with breath, it's great. So whether it could be a yoga pose or a mindful walk or a run or some kind of sport, lifting weights, anything, doing squats, using the wall, doing wall push-ups, any kind of movement's going to be really good to start moving that anxiety out. I say moving it out of the body, but really what you're doing is you're calming the nervous system from this alert that it's on, that you're feeling unsafe in a sense in some way because you're going to be evaluated and judged. You don't want that. You're not consciously thinking it, but this is like neurobiologically, these things are happening and you want to come back to a more grounded state. You're going to have to, for sure, do some of that movement and that hands-on heart breathing. It's going to be really, really good. One of my favorites is just doing the walking because you're always able to walk. You're walking in the hallway. So maybe you're still, you're at school. You don't have the opportunity. You're not in gym yet. You're not going home. Maybe you're in sports, but that's not going to be until after school. But you can take advantage of doing the walk in the hallway with more intention. So instead of having the conversations in the hallway, you can just, again, use your breath. Find a focal point in the hallway and use that mindful breath, the deep breath in through the nose, exhale out of the mouth. And sometimes that's really hard because our brain wants to focus on something very specifically. So it's good to add a count. So you can add something like I call 3-5. I'm like naming multiple strategies in one, but sometimes you have to have it. So even if I were doing, say, like hands on heart, I do this literally walking all the time because it feels good. It's calming to the nervous system. So I'm walking around. So now everybody knows when I have my hand on my heart, Miss Davis is feeling a little, anxious about something. And here I am and breathing, mindfully breathing, but you can add the count 3-5. So you inhale 1, 2, and your inhale lasts until 3 at the top of the third count. And then you exhale out of the nose or mouth, 5, 4, 3, 1. And that gives the mind an anchor to focus on something where if I'm just breathing in and out, I could do it a couple times and I'm thinking about, am I going to have pizza later on? Right? Yeah. Like, what was I doing? So, but if I can keep my mind focused on that in 3, out 5, hands on heart, and then combine it with walking, now I'm using like 3 things in one. I've got the gentle compression, I have the mindful breathing, and I'm also moving my body, which will help your anxiety significantly to tame it, right? So we name it these things to tame it, but we're also taming the impact it's having on us emotionally and mentally. And just to say really quick, Missy, if I can't move, and I'm not walking in the hallway, I'm still in my chair, I can just do, some side to sides, any kind of movement that I can do. It seems like the silliest thing. I remember thinking, this is insane. Like, I just twist, like I'm supposed to feel better. But your mind likes to trick you. Like, that's not going to be helpful. Don't believe it because it is helpful. So even if you can't move around because you're still in the class, you can still do the hands on heart, kind of move from the side, and go 1, 2, 3, exhale 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, back to the center. You can twist to the other side. Inhale 1, 2, 3. So through your nose, exhale back to the center. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I guarantee you nobody's even going to be watching what you're doing because they're focused about their own self-consciousness. I know a lot of kids think, oh God, this is going to look weird. And I like to remind them, don't worry. Nobody is really paying attention to what you're doing because they're worried about what you're thinking about them. Yep. So that's a really great practice that you can do sitting, and then you can combine the walking in school or outside of school, and then go do your favorite movement after that.
I love that. And I think even thinking about, which maybe this isn't right, but I feel like it would be, right? You think about people who are anxious, myself included. Like if I'm feeling a little bit anxious, my legs bounce, right?
Oh, yeah.
I get that jittery leg. It's like something like my mom has kind of always made fun of my dad and I for, like if we're just like have this nervous energy. And so I'm like, okay, your body already wants to do that. But like, I think it's that intentional piece that I'm really like latching onto. It's like, okay, harness, right? Like instead of jittering, do the 3-5 with like raising your legs together. Or if it's like just doing calf raises, like at your seat. I'm just trying to think of, to your point, right? Like they're confined to their seat. We want them to be in their seats, a lot of the day. it's like, yeah, what can you do? A twist,
But
like
you know, Missy,
knee
too,
raises,
you just
or
like a shakeout is really good too. So a teacher that has that lens, that mindful lens, that also knows that sitting that long is really hard, maybe notices some students doing that with their leg, to have brain breaks planned throughout the day in their lesson, particularly when you know you're going to have a quiz or a test is coming up. You really want to be intentional about adding these mindful brain breaks. And it's just called shakeout. So students at first, I mean, lower school students, they're going to be all for it. Middle school students are going to be a little reticent. But you know what? You hype up the energy, you get them out, you know, you're saying, look, this is non-negotiable. We are all doing this shakeout. When I say, you know, 1, 2, go, we're going to stand up and I'm going to give you 3 seconds. We're going to stand behind our chair, put on their favorite song, and we're literally just going to shake it out of our whole body. Like whatever you have to do, and you model it for them, and you know, you do it for like 5 seconds and you freeze the body, and then you take a breath. You can even do the hands on heart or just drop the arms by the side. You can put the hands on the belly, take a breath in, exhale it all out. And I really like to do that one out of the mouth, just to like really have them visualize, you know what, let all of the things that you're worried about, just let them go. Actually, you can visualize when you're breathing, like the bag of stress, like you're breathing it all in this bag, and the exhales, you're going to just let it all go out of the bag. And then you do the shakeout a few more times. And it does wonders. One, it gets you up out of your chair, it keeps you moving. And when our body is triggered like that, we're feeling, you know, even maybe we haven't named it yet. So for those that aren't naming it to tame it yet, even though that's a helpful strategy, just moving the body in that way will definitely help. Those that are struggling with the performance anxiety or their focus, you know, at that point in time will help them focus. And it just makes the learning stickier, because when we're combining learning with movement, it makes it stickier. So there's just a lot of great reasons to incorporate it. And it seems, again, like, what? I just stand up and shake out my body. But again, remember the energy you bring into the classroom. Like you control, you know, the temperature in your classroom. So if I'm bringing the energy in that this is awesome, it's going to work, we're going to do it, going to hype this up. Well, not all students are going to be as hype as you in that moment, but you're going to impact them to be as hype as you at some point in time. So remember, you bring the hype up, you model that for them, do the shakeout a few times. It's a great practice, one I lean on no matter what age. And I do myself, you know, because I can't, you know, I like you, like, even if it's not anxiety, it's just like, I can't sit and focus anymore. I've got to get up and move.
Right. Yeah, just need to move. Yeah. Okay. So are there any other strategies that, you know, maybe educators or parents can be helping? I think to your point, right? Like, this is stuff that the students are having to physically do themselves. And we as the adults in their lives are supposed to help facilitate and teach and educate around that. But yeah, are any other strategies that you might have that, I'm just thinking about, like, my goal, right, is like, there are going to be schools that don't have an Athea Davis in their building.
Yeah.
Whether they don't have the budgets or don't yet know the importance, right? Like, but probably more so it's the budgetary constraints. And so I want them to be able to listen to this episode and be like, great, I now have strategies. Like, I have talked to somebody who this is their work, and these are things that I can model for my classroom, especially in advance of state testing. But to your point, like, even just a normal quiz.
We also did hands on heart breathing. So that's a strategy in itself. I'm just taking my hands, stacking them on top of each other, gently compressing on my heart, sitting nice and tall, and I'm being intentional with my breath. Don't try to get too technical here with the breath, okay? It's just, again, long, slow, deep breath in through the nose. Exhale a little bit longer out of your nose or mouth. You can do it that way. So that's hands on heart. We also added a counting breath to that. So if you didn't want your hands on your heart or any part of your body, you just wanted to sit them on your thighs or just have your arms relaxed, you can just say 3-5 breath. And that's an inhale for 1, 2, 3 through the nose. Exhale out of the mouth, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then you add the count. And when you're working with students, you can say the count out loud, have them say the count silently to themselves. So we talked about the counting breath, and we also talked about adding, if you were either doing the counting breath or the hands on heart, you could combine that with just a little twist in your chair. Like, if you need some movement, but you can't get up, just do the little twist in the chair, and you inhale 3 to one side. So say to the left, if I start there, 1, 2, 3, exhale out of the mouth or nose back to the center for 5. And then you do it again on the right side. And that's just like very gentle. Maybe you can't get the whole class up at that time, but you really do need the class up and moving at some point. Again, in any lesson, particularly around testing. So have everybody get up and do the shakeout. You could do the shakeout by just adding a count of 5 or 10, adding one of their favorite songs. They do the shakeout. You do the shake. Don't just stand there and watch them do the shakeout. Do the shakeout with them. Model it for them. Say, this feels really good. It does feel good. And don't worry, it's going to be silly. And you got to name that too. Like, this is silly, I know, but it just feels so good to like get all the blood flowing and moving. And then, I'm helping my energy go up. And that feels really, really, really good. Yeah. So those were the strategies we've covered. Another breathing tool is Take 5. So I like Take 5 breathing because it combines touch and movement, and that helps maintain focus in the mind. It's a great mind anchor is what we call it. So, we have 5 fingers here. Take 5. I'm going to take my hands, spread my fingers, but that light touch around the fingers, one, it helps ground me in my body and gets me out of my mind. What's happening when we have performance anxiety is we're too much in our mind, right? Remember that. Psyching ourselves out. We want to get out of our mind into our body. So this is called embodiment. We want to get into our body. That's what these techniques do too, like the shake out or the movement, the gentle compression is going to help you get out of the mind back into the body. So take 5, index finger, opposite hand. You're going to inhale up outside of the thumb, exhale down the thumb. Inhale up the index finger, exhale down. And you just keep with that pattern. Inhale up, middle finger, exhale down. Inhale up, ring finger, exhale down. Inhale up, pinky finger, exhale down. And then you can do the opposite palm for Take 5 too. So you go with your breathing pattern. But remember, for mindful breathing pattern, don't be too, technical about it. Just slow breath in through the nose, exhale out of the nose or mouth. Make the exhale slightly longer. And you can count on that 3, 5. But since we're already counting here, don't do the 3, 5. It's just an inhale up, exhale down. And I like this one because you can either have the hand up, you can have it on your lap, you can be at your desk. Nobody has to know what you're doing. You can do this in the restroom. I always tell students too, if you really are, that worried, take a restroom break and go pull yourself together. Take a mindful moment in the stall. Nothing wrong with that. I do it all the time. Teachers included, because students are the only ones that are struggling with this anxiety, with all the testing pressures of what are your scores? How are the students? And the anxiety, as you said, it has increased post-COVID because of the gaps that we're seeing in learning post-COVID and the pressures to get students on par from where they were pre-COVID. So these are great strategies, not just for students, for all ages, from lower school to high school, but for teachers included. So I really like that Take 5 because, again, it includes the touch. The touch, again, just like the compression, the reason why that works is because it gets us back into the body and out of the mind. It's just a very simple tool that can help us kind of flip the script of what's happening inside our head back into the body. And something I must say too, as another strategy, because we talked about negative self-talk, when you hear yourself saying, I'm so stupid, this is never going to work out for me. When you notice yourself saying that, name the fact that you have negative self-talk and you flip it to a positive self-talk and say, you know what? I've prepared the best I can. And whatever happens, it's going to be the best I could do in this moment. And you really have to just kind of let go and trust. And sometimes that means we're going to have a good score. Sometimes that means we're not going to have a good score. And that's okay. Like, wherever you are on the spectrum, we've all been there. So it's just information, just data, like, oh, okay, well, I need to work more on this skill. And you've got, the more that you work with that mindset, the better you're going to get at it being okay. You're not going to be perfect at everything. If you were, you wouldn't be learning anything, right? And so really flipping that script and using that positive self-talk or those affirmations that I've prepared, I'm doing all these things to take care of myself. I'm going to do my best. And, whatever the result will be, it will be that result.
I love that. I love that. I can't wait to share this. This is going to be so great. I'm thinking about, like, I have a 6.5-year-old.
Oh, yeah. Oh, they'll
And so
love 6.5. So
yeah,
the take 5, I
yeah,
call it
yeah.
starfish breathing.
Starfish breathing for the littles. Okay.
Yeah. So that's a fun way to like connect it to the littles. So you could still call it take 5, but then, the littles are like starfish, and then you can pull up a picture of a starfish, and you can actually make a starfish out of your hands, have them color, and then they have their own little tool that they always have, tape it to their desk, and they can just trace it on the desk too. So there's just a lot of fun ways you could work with it.
Listen to that. I think that's so great. I know, because we've done breathing with my girls.
Yeah.
And they're taking to it okay. But I like that intentionality and the slowness of it. Like, it gives them just a pattern to follow. So
yeah.
That's great. Oh my goodness, Athea, I feel like I could talk to you forever about this. You're just like a wealth of strategies and information. Obviously, for our listeners, like, you've got your own podcast, you've got your book. I will direct and put all of those links. You do have an event coming up.
Yes.
Soon. Tell us a little bit about that. I want to make sure that we plug that in.
So anybody that, whether you're a leader, an educator, or a parent, and you have made some kind of mindfulness-based resource, my work with the Coalition of Schools Educating Mindfully, we have a really big event coming up on February 1st called our Virtual Resource Showcase. Right now, we're accepting vendor applications until February 9th. So if you have a resource that you want to share, please go to our website at edmindfully.org/application and fill out the vendor application. We'd love to have you. It'll be an all-day virtual event where you can network and connect with other mindfulness-based creators and leaders and share your offering with others that need it in the classroom, that need it in their schools, that need it in their homes or their organizations. So again, this is anybody working with young people K through 12. You've created some kind of resource, curriculum, videos, audio, books, anything like that you want to share and get out into the world. We'd love to have you, and go to edmindfully.org to learn more.
Love it. Okay. Yes, and I will link all of that in the episode notes, and you're active on the socials. So I have that handle there, so you can follow her and just, get all the tips and tricks that you need to be able to be effective. Whether it's, like I said, you're a parent listening and you have a kid who struggles with performance anxiety, here are some things you can do. Or if you're an educator and just need some strategies as you kind of go into the testing season. Okay, we have 2 things before we wrap up, Athea. I'm going to ask you a final question.
Okay.
It is the question I ask all of my guests. It's in the spirit of my company's name, CheckBox Pro. What is one thing, big or small, personal or professional, that you hope to check off today?
Ooh, that I hope to check off today, big or small. At the end of today, I would like to check off sitting in my contemplation chair and reflecting on all the great conversations that I've had with students and parents throughout this week. There's been many great conversations, lots of great projects going on. And when you're moving and grooving, you're just like in the moment, but I haven't got to process all of it. And I just want to steep myself in a reflective mode and just experience that moment of joy of all the hard work that's gone into those conversations, right? Because things are happening in the background for those conversations to occur. So just steep myself in a moment of joy in my contemplation chair.
I love that. And also, we might need a contemplation chair in my household somewhere.
I know.
A chair. It's a contemplation chair. I need you to go contemplate. You might do some renaming.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. Well, our final thing is I would love for you to walk us through a mindfulness exercise. So if you want to introduce it, and then that will be the thing to close us out.
Okay. Sounds good. So I'm going to do the body scan. This is not the full version. There are long ones. So this is going to be a short body scan. And I'm going to just dive right in. This is for all ages. So you can use this and play it in your classroom. Just bring it up. And I love body scan. Again, it's a great mindful grounding practice. So wherever you are, I invite you to sit nice and tall. I invite you to close your eyes. If it's uncomfortable to close your eyes, gently gaze towards a focal point. It's an object that's not moving. So you can just gaze towards the keys on the keyboard or an object that's near you. If your legs are crossed, uncross. Ground your feet into the floor. So really root your feet into your shoes and shoes into the floor. Relax your shoulders. And with your hands, they can be on your thighs, on your belly, or your heart. Don't worry about your breath pattern right now. Just notice your breath. In a moment, I'll guide you to be really intentional with your breath. As your shoulders are relaxed and you're rising in your upper body, as if someone's pulling you by a string from the crown of your head, nice and tall. Inhale, long, slow, deep through the nose. And then exhale everything out of the mouth. And the next one, you're going to inhale through the nose. And then you can exhale through the nose or mouth. Now I want you to keep that mindful breathing pattern. Deep inhale through the nose. Slightly deep, longer exhale through the nose or mouth. As your eyes are closed or you're gazing towards your focal point, you're going to mindfully bring your attention in your mind's eye, where we see pictures, visualizing, going to that place energetically in your body, just to your feet. And just noticing your feet grounded on the floor. No judgment, just bringing attention to your feet as you breathe in, as you breathe out. We're going to go up the body from the feet all the way to the crown. As you inhale, just bringing your attention to your legs, to your knees and to your thighs, just noticing those parts of your body as you breathe in and breathing out. In your next inhale, bringing your attention to your belly, to the back side of your body, breathing in and breathing out. And just noticing as you bring your attention to your belly, there's no judgment. You might notice tightness. You might notice gurgling from being hungry. There's no judgment. Just noticing any sensations you might feel and just letting it go. Breathing in as we travel up to the heart. Same here. Just noticing. Does it feel open? Does it feel tense? As you breathe in through the nose and as you exhale through the mouth. There's no right or wrong, just sensations that you feel. Next inhale. You're going to bring attention to your fingers, to your arms, and to your shoulders. Just noticing these parts of your body, breathing in and breathing out. Next inhale, traveling up to our throat, to our face, and to our hair, to the back of our head. Going at your breathing pattern, breathing out, nice and slow, just bringing attention to those parts of the body. Big inhale and big exhale. Now we're going to connect all of those parts of the body for completeness and wholeness. As you inhale, going all the way back down to your toes, from feet to legs, to belly to heart, to fingers, arms, shoulders, throat, face, head and hair, all connected, complete and whole. Exhale slowly out of your mouth or nose. Again, just noticing without judgment these spaces in our body. What we may notice is not right or wrong. It just is. Breathing in, feeling complete, connected, and whole. As you exhale out, take a quiet 2 to 3 seconds so the eyes still closed or gazing towards your focal point, and then flutter your eyes open. And that's body scan. That's a quick body scan. So I like body scan because it gets us into our body. We're not in our body. We're in our head all day long. And there's a lot of things happening in our body. It's a different kind of language. So maybe we notice things like, sensation like tension in different parts of the body. No judgment. It's just something to notice. Like, oh, maybe I noticed tension in my shoulder or tightness in my belly or gurgling in my stomach. It could mean I'm hungry. It could mean, oh, that's interesting. So have a healthy dose of just curiosity. Like, that's interesting that, I have this tightness here. That might mean something. It might mean I just have a little tension right now, but it gives us data, it gives us that internal data so we know how to move forward and how to manage it with more mindful awareness. So body scan is a great tool to help us get into our body and understand what's happening so we can do our best and be our best in all respects.
I love that. Athea, thank you so much. Thank you so much for the work you're doing. Thank you for sharing some of those strategies with our listeners. For all of our listeners out there, if you are entering into test season, we are cheering you on.
Yes.
And, if you're not saying positive self-talk now, just know that we are speaking that over you, that you'll do great during this time. And and with that, thank you so much. And we'll see y'all next time.
Thanks, Missy.
Thank you all for listening to today's Pros Series conversation. Our team is always looking for more pros to learn from in the field of education. So if you have a recommendation for a future guest, or maybe you are the pro, then send us a note at info@checkboxpro.com. And if you want to hear from more pros, then like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so that you don't miss an episode. And by doing so, this also helps more folks find our show. So take a moment to check that box off your list today.